There's a kind of silence that happens right after a slap, not the physical kind, but the emotional kind. When it lands, it echoes. She stood under that chandelier with her hand halfway out, fingers twitching like they still had some hold over me. Like months of betrayal could be erased by the way she tilted her head. But I didn't move. I let the music, the clinking glasses, the fake laughter of her coworkers keep playing around us like nothing was happening. And then I whispered, "Not after what you did." She froze. Her mouth twitched into something between confusion and panic, but she tried to hold composure because her boss was 10 feet away. Let her squirm. Let her feel what I've been living with for the last 147 days. Yes, I counted. That's what you do when everything unravels slowly. When you're the only one pulling thread after thread while the other person still smiles like you're crazy. You probably think I'm the bitter type. I am. But I wasn't. Not until the afternoon I walked into our living room and found the TV still playing, her shoes by the door, and her work laptop open. Not locked, not even sleeping. And on the screen, a document titled Packing List, Kauai. We weren't going to Kauai. We weren't going anywhere. We hadn't even been sleeping in the same room. I clicked. I read. I wish I hadn't. It listed 2 beach towels, 2 toothbrushes, 1 reservation number, 1 very specific note under the essentials section. He prefers oat milk. Don't forget the allergy meds. Ask front desk for extras. I don't drink oat milk. I'm not allergic to anything. That packing list wasn't for me. That's when I knew. But I didn't confront her. Not then. I did something worse. I waited. I cleaned the house, washed the car, told her I loved her when she came home late, even made her favorite dinner. Why? Because I wanted her to be comfortable. I wanted her to relax, to slip, to underestimate me. And she did. That trip to Kauai? It never happened. Because I made sure of that. But this story isn't about the trip. It's about the party, the night she thought I'd play along. The night I dressed in the suit she once said made me look important. The night I walked into her glass tower of a world and didn't beg. I stood at the edge of that glowing room and let her watch me laugh with her coworkers. She didn't know I'd met him already. She didn't know what I'd told him. And by the end of the night, she'd wish she never put my name on that RSVP. He wasn't what I expected. I had imagined someone flashier. A loud shirt-wearing, gym-sculpted, sales-slick cliché. But when I finally saw him, standing in line for coat check, he looked boring. Average. The kind of guy who blends into a boardroom and disappears during small talk. Soft jaw, soft hands, soft voice. But you know what the most infuriating part was? He looked comfortable. Like he belonged. And I didn't. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. I thought I'd walk up, slam the truth down like a gavel, and watch the whole charade fall apart. But when I stood behind him, watching him nervously scroll through his phone, probably checking if she'd texted, I realized I didn't want theatrics. I wanted precision. So I walked past him without a word and headed for the event hall. The hotel was nauseatingly elegant. Over-gilded everything, tall mirrors, string quartet in the corner playing something cheerful. I found the coordinator and told her I was here on behalf of Mrs. Genevieve Halperin. That's her full name. Halperin. My name. She still hadn't changed it. The coordinator smiled, offered me a name badge, and I slipped her something small, a sealed envelope with my wife's initials written in her own handwriting. I had copied it carefully from a sticky note on our fridge. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, I had printed 3 things. A screenshot of her calendar, showing the overlapping hotel stays. A copy of the packing list she accidentally saved to our shared cloud. And a photo. The photo that broke me. It wasn't graphic. Nothing explicit. Just her and him, laughing in a booth, her hand on his chest, both of them illuminated by candlelight. The date stamp on the corner was the same night she had told me she was at a team debrief dinner with her supervisor. He wasn't her supervisor. He was her mistake. I asked the coordinator to deliver the envelope to her table once the awards began. Then I left, walked out, sat in my car, and stared at the dashboard for 15 straight minutes. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt hollow. And then my phone buzzed. It was her. One text. 4 words. Did you come here? I didn't respond. I waited. And 20 minutes later, she appeared, heels clacking on the marble, jacket in her hand, eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. She spotted me standing by the side entrance and walked over slowly, like every step was a negotiation. "Caleb," she started. I said nothing. She reached for my hand. And that's when I leaned forward and whispered, so low it barely stirred the air. Not after what you did. And I watched her face crumble. She looked around like someone might save her. But no one was watching. No one cared. For once, the mask cracked. And what was underneath wasn't guilt. It was fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of being exposed. And that was just the beginning. She texted me 6 times that night. The first was frantic. The second had hearts. By the fourth, she was angry. By the 6th, she wrote, "Whatever game you're playing, Caleb, stop. Please." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked into the office early the next morning, carrying a small flash drive in my coat pocket and a feeling in my chest I didn't recognize. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was clarity. You see, I'd spent too long thinking I was overreacting. That maybe she was allowed to drift. That I was being overly sensitive, overly needy, overly me. But that photo, her hand on his chest, that hotel suite she didn't think I'd ever discover, those weren't my insecurities. That was proof. The flash drive contained the documents, of course, but also the recordings. You didn't think I'd leave that out, did you? I never meant to install the software on our home laptop. It was left over from a freelance project, a monitoring program designed to detect unusual user behavior for corporate systems. But one day, I noticed it had quietly cataloged screenshots from a week when I was out of town visiting my brother. She had used the laptop. She had logged into her personal cloud. She had messaged someone named S.G. repeatedly. And the logs, saved in background auto-snap intervals, showed brief flashes of their chats. I couldn't read everything, but I read enough. Enough to know that S.G. wasn't just some work contact. He had called her babe. He had sent her a flight itinerary. He had thanked her for last night. So I compiled everything. Not for revenge. Not even for divorce court. For the one group of people who needed to know, her company. Because she had used her work position, her title, to arrange these trips. She billed them as strategy meetings, added phantom clients to their internal logs, and approved expense reimbursements for 2, while only listing herself in reports. And when you work for a logistics firm that handles multi-million-dollar international shipments, cooking travel receipts is a little more than a bad look. So I scheduled a meeting. Not with her. With her boss. His name was Malcolm Tiernan, VP of Operations. Stone-faced guy. Always wore the same gray jacket. Looked like someone who'd fire you mid-sentence. He didn't know who I was when I introduced myself in the lobby. Just raised an eyebrow, led me to a side room, and asked, "This about Genevieve?" I slid the flash drive across the table and said, "You should probably watch what's in here before this becomes a company-wide problem." He asked me one question. "Are these copies?" I nodded. He didn't say another word. By 3 p.m., her team had an unscheduled HR meeting. She wasn't invited. I don't know what happened in that room. I don't need to. What I do know is that when she came home that evening, still wearing her party dress under a borrowed coat, she didn't say anything for a full minute. She just stood in the doorway, eyes glazed, and asked one question, "What did you do?" I looked at her. This woman I once wanted to grow old with. This woman who said forever like it meant something. And I replied, "I stopped covering for you." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She sat down on the edge of the couch and whispered, "They're investigating me, Caleb. You could have just left. Why ruin me?" I didn't answer, because that question said everything I needed to know. She still didn't think she'd done anything wrong. By the next morning, her card stopped working. She called me from her office in a hushed voice, the kind you use when you're trying not to let the panic seep through the walls. "Did you do something?" she asked. I didn't reply. I just stared at the window, watching the rain cut down the glass like it had somewhere to be. I knew exactly what had happened. The company hadn't waited. After I gave them the flash drive, they'd gone straight to their finance department and quietly flagged everything tied to her employee ID. Travel expenses, per diem reimbursements, project bonuses, even the company phone bill. I knew this because one of her colleagues, an old friend of mine from before she climbed the ladder, texted me late that night with 5 words. They're turning her inside out. Her world was unraveling. And yet, somehow, she still came home like nothing had snapped. I was sitting at the kitchen table, eating reheated takeout, when she stormed through the door in that same off-white trench coat she always wore when she needed to feel in control. She dropped her bag hard on the floor, looked right at me, and said, They've frozen everything, Caleb. My card got declined buying coffee. Coffee. I didn't even look up from my plate. She sat down across from me, hands trembling. They called me into a meeting. Said there were irregularities. That someone submitted evidence anonymously. They're doing a full audit. I chewed slowly, then finally asked, "Did they tell you what the evidence was?" Her eyes darted away. "No, but I know it was you." And there it was. No denial. No fake outrage. Just blame. Always blame. "Genevieve," I said carefully, "I gave them receipts. I didn't forge anything. I didn't make you book hotel rooms under your name. I didn't make you log those expenses or submit that travel report saying you flew alone. You did that." She stood up so fast her chair screeched backward. "You don't understand how much pressure I've been under. They expect perfection. And for what? So I can come home to a man who doesn't fight for me." That was the moment something inside me cracked, but not the way you think. I didn't shout. I didn't throw things. I just sat there and really looked at her. Not the version I married, but the version sitting in front of me now. And I finally saw it. She wasn't sorry. She was scared. Scared of losing her job, her image, her control. But she wasn't scared of losing me. "I did fight for you," I said, voice shaking now. "I fought every night you came home and smiled like you weren't somewhere else. I fought when you said those trips were strictly professional while deleting your texts in the bathroom. I fought when I blamed myself for not being exciting enough, rich enough, tall enough, whatever enough. But I'm done swinging at shadows while you play dress up with our marriage." She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she grabbed her bag and muttered, "If you wanted to destroy me, congratulations." But she still didn't get it. I hadn't destroyed her. She had done that all by herself. What I did next wasn't out of malice. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping in the drawer under our sink, the one with the highlighted transactions, the screenshots, the backup files from her cloud account, and something else. Something she didn't know I had. A copy of the lease to an apartment in her name. One I hadn't signed. One located downtown, near her office. One she'd been paying for in cash withdrawals split under $500. She saw the paper and froze. "You've been living a double life?" I said quietly. "Now you can go live at full time." And that was the first time I saw her cry since this began. She begged, not for forgiveness, but for time. "Just let me fix this. I can fix this." But I was already walking to the bedroom, pulling out the suitcase I had packed days ago. I didn't slam the door when I left. I closed it softly, because when the damage is done, volume doesn't matter anymore. I didn't go far, just far enough. There's a motel on the edge of town. Ugly thing, lime green shutters, cracked parking lot. Buzzing light above room 12 that's been broken since the Bush administration. But it had a door that locked and silence behind the walls. That's all I wanted. A quiet place to breathe. To exist without walking on emotional landmines. I checked in under my middle name and paid cash. I didn't even bring my laptop. No TV. No distractions. Just a beat-up notebook, some instant coffee, and the ugly realization that I hadn't been living for months. I'd just been waiting for her next lie. It was 2 days before she found me. I came back from a walk around the block, and there she was, sitting on the stairs in that same trench coat, like she didn't know how ridiculous it looked outside a place where people rent rooms by the hour. Her eyes were puffy. Her hair was tied up like she hadn't slept. And when she stood, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked worse, but because she looked honest. "I called your sister," she said quietly. "She told me you weren't staying with her. This was the only place I could think of. I didn't invite her in. She followed me anyway. Room 12 smelled like bleach and air freshener trying to cover something up. She sat on the edge of the bed while I leaned against the desk, arms crossed, waiting. She looked around, her nose twitching. "This place is awful." "It's mine," I said. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, after a long silence, she said, "I got suspended. Indefinitely." Malcolm didn't even look at me when he said it. I said nothing. She rubbed her eyes, then whispered, "You hate me now, don't you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No. Hating you would mean I still cared enough to burn for this." That hit her. She flinched like I'd thrown something. "I made a mistake," she blurted out. I shook my head. "You made a series of decisions. General mistakes are typos. You don't accidentally rent an apartment downtown and fill it with someone else's preferences." And then, as if this was a rom-com and not the wreckage of our lives, she tried to take my hand. That's when I stopped her, again. And that's when the door behind me opened. A woman stepped into the room holding a bag of takeout and 2 cans of iced tea. She froze mid-step, immediately catching the tension in the air. Jen's eyes widened, her face draining color so fast I thought she might faint. "This a bad time?" the woman asked carefully. I looked between them. "No. Come in." Her name was Willa. No, she wasn't a rebound. We weren't sleeping together. She was the front desk clerk. She'd seen me pacing outside every evening, offered me a sandwich the first night, and over the next couple days, we ended up talking about everything but what had happened. She didn't know the details. She didn't care. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could speak without watching my words crack under someone's scrutiny. Genevieve stood. "Is this a joke?" Willa blinked. "Sorry, I thought." "You thought right," I said, cutting her off. "You're welcome here." Jen looked at me like I'd stabbed her in front of an audience. "So that's it. You move out, and suddenly you're sharing greasy tacos and poetry nights with a stranger?" "No," I said calmly. "I moved out and found peace. Something you haven't given me in a long, long time." She didn't say goodbye. She just walked out. And Willa, bless her, didn't ask a single question. She just handed me my food, sat across from me, and said, "You okay?" And for the first time in what felt like years, I nodded. I think I finally might be. But peace doesn't last long when someone like Genevieve loses everything. I learned that the next morning, when my phone lit up with a notification. New email. Urgent legal action. Response required. The email subject line alone made my stomach lurch. Urgent legal action. Response required. I stared at the screen for a full minute, wondering if I should open it at all. Part of me hoped it was spam, some phishing scam trying to impersonate a law firm. But the logo was legitimate. The signature was real. The attached PDF? Even worse. It was from a firm in the city I'd never heard of before, Denton and Reeve, LLP, but the name listed under client representation was very familiar. Genevieve Halperin. She'd retained legal counsel. I clicked the attachment, hands cold, mouth dry. The document wasn't a divorce filing. Not yet. It was a notice of protective financial interest, a fancy way of saying, don't touch anything, don't move anything, don't spend anything, or we'll sue. I scrolled down and found something that stopped me cold. Attached at the end of the packet was a scanned copy of our prenup. But we never signed one. At least, I didn't. The document was dated 2 weeks before our wedding, complete with my name, her name, notarization, signatures. All looked authentic. Even the handwriting looked eerily close to mine. But I knew one thing for sure. I never signed that paper. I would have remembered, because I fought her on it. Genevieve brought it up during our engagement, saying it was standard, something her parents insisted on. I refused. I told her love shouldn't come with escape hatches. She backed off. So why was there now a prenup with my name on it in ink? I called the number listed at the bottom. A receptionist answered, transferred me to a junior partner named Clayton Weller. He picked up on the second ring and said, before I could even speak, "Mr. Halperin, I take it you've received our preliminary notice. We'd prefer to handle this amicably." I didn't answer right away. I was still trying to slow my breathing. "How did you get this prenup?" I asked, voice tight. There was a pause, then paper shuffling. "It was provided by your wife. She informed us it was signed mutually in the presence of a notary in July 2014. "That's not possible," I said flatly. "Because that never happened." Another pause. Longer this time. "Well, in that case, Mr. Halperin, I would advise you to consult your own counsel before we proceed any further. If there has been a misunderstanding, we'd prefer to resolve it quietly." But I knew what this was. Forgery. She was trying to secure her assets, probably worried I'd go after her savings, or the condo we co-owned, or even the car that was technically in my name. And instead of speaking to me, she went behind my back and handed a legal team a fabricated document. The woman I married was gone, and the woman left behind, she wasn't just selfish. She was calculated. I didn't have a lawyer on speed dial. I wasn't the type of man who ever thought I'd need one. But I had something better, my brother, Dalton. He was a financial auditor and a numbers guy through and through. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people usually listened. When I showed him the scanned prenup over lunch that day, he barely blinked. "You didn't sign this," he said immediately. "No," I replied. "But it looks exactly like my signature." He leaned closer. "Because it is your signature, lifted from the mortgage agreement. Look." He pulled out a photo of an old document I'd co-signed with Jen years earlier for our home refinance. Same stroke, same angle. But if you overlay it, you'll see distortion. My mind was racing. You think she copied and pasted my signature? Not her, he said, chewing slowly. Whoever notarized this did. I'd bet money the notary's name is fake too. I didn't know what to say. The world was tilting again. Genevieve hadn't just betrayed me emotionally or financially. Now she was stepping into something darker, something potentially criminal. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 2 days later, when I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. The voice on the line was quiet, shaky. Caleb, it's Lorraine, Genevieve's mother. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. I need to see you, she said, almost whispering. Please. It's about what she did, and I don't think you know everything. I hadn't seen Lorraine Halperin since our 5th wedding anniversary, when she gave us a silver frame engraved with the words, "Whatever happens, keep choosing each other." Ironic now. Back then, she was warm but sharp-edged, the type of woman who hugged you tightly and whispered judgments in the same breath. Genevieve always said she got her backbone from her mother. But when Lorraine called me out of nowhere and asked to meet someplace quiet, I knew it wasn't a social call. We chose a park bench overlooking one of those decorative ponds where old men feed ducks and retirees play chess. Lorraine arrived 10 minutes early, already seated, a wool scarf wrapped tight around her neck despite the sun. I sat beside her and waited, unsure if I should say anything. She spoke first. I know what she did to you, Caleb, and I'm not going to defend her. That alone caught me off guard. I expected denial, anger, some parental instinct to shield her daughter. But Lorraine looked tired, older than I remembered, as if the weight of the last few weeks had aged her years. She thinks I don't know, she continued, eyes fixed on the water. But I do. About the apartment, the falsified prenup, the man she's been seeing. I knew months ago. I turned slowly toward her. How? She hesitated. Because I hired someone. The world stilled. You what? Lorraine finally looked at me, her eyes rimmed with guilt. Genevieve has always been good at secrets, but not perfect. A few things started to feel off. She stopped calling, became distant, cold. She told me once you were going through a depressive episode and might leave her. She made it sound like you were spiraling, but something didn't add up. I clenched my jaw. Of course she said that. Set the stage. Build the narrative. Always stay 2 steps ahead. I hired someone to follow her during her last business trip, Lorraine said. He found her at a hotel with a man who wasn't you. Not once. Twice. I confronted her. She denied everything, said I was interfering. We didn't speak for a month. I didn't know what to say. The idea of Genevieve lying to even her own mother was disturbing, but what Lorraine told me next was worse. She forged a prenup once before, she whispered. I stared. What? She was engaged before you. Briefly. His name was Bennett. They were young. He came from money. She said it ended because he didn't trust her. But the truth is, she tried to pass off a forged agreement after they split. Tried to claim shared ownership of a property he bought. He caught it. Buried it. Never pressed charges. My mind reeled. You're telling me she's done this before? Lorraine nodded slowly. I should have stopped her then. But I didn't. I told myself she'd grow out of it. She was ambitious, calculated, but she was my daughter. I made excuses. She reached into her coat and pulled out a slim manila envelope. You need to see this. Inside was a notarized statement from Bennett, the ex-fiancé, along with a redacted version of the original report he nearly filed with the police. Dates, names, a matching pattern of behavior. It was all there, down to the forged signature technique, nearly identical to what she did to me. I read it, hands trembling, then looked back at Lorraine. Why are you showing me this now? Because I didn't want you to find out after it was too late, she said. I may not be your mother, Caleb, but I saw the way you loved her. You didn't deserve this. We sat in silence after that. The ducks floated by, unconcerned. I folded the statement back into the envelope, tucked it under my arm, and nodded once. Thank you. As I stood to leave, Lorraine reached out and gripped my wrist. One more thing. I looked down at her. She's planning to file next week. I overheard her on the phone. She wants to rush the divorce, claim mental cruelty, and use that fake prenup to protect her assets. But there's more. She's afraid you'll find something. Find what? She kept a folder, Lorraine said softly. Physical. locked in the back of her closet in a red box. She never let anyone near it, not even me. I felt the air leave my lungs, because I knew that box, and I had the spare key. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the key. Genevieve always kept her backup set in a ceramic tray shaped like a leaf, a gift from some wellness conference she dragged me to years ago. The moment she left for another meeting the next day, I slipped into the house, walked straight to the tray, and picked it up. The little brass key was still there, nestled under expired coupons and a forgotten bracelet. I knew exactly where to go. Back of the walk-in closet. Top shelf. Red lockbox with a scratched surface and a stubborn lid. The kind of thing you'd never look at twice, unless you knew what you were looking for. The key turned easily. Inside, I found documents. Dozens. Maybe more. Old ones. New ones. Letters. Receipts. Bank transfers. A few torn-up drafts of what looked like legal templates she must have tried to rewrite herself. And tucked inside a file labeled simply JL was a name I hadn't heard in years. Jacob Lanning. Genevieve's ex. Not the one Lorraine mentioned. Another one. The one who disappeared halfway through her sophomore year of college. She told me he moved abroad. What she didn't tell me was that she had taken out a joint credit card with him, without his knowledge. Maxed it. Defaulted. He'd tried to press charges, but dropped them when her father resolved it quietly. Page after page, I saw the pattern. Fabricated control. Manipulation. Carefully constructed versions of the truth. Always just enough believable detail to pass. Always just enough affection to distract. And at the bottom of the box, a small, square photo of me from our first apartment. I was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, holding a book across my chest. Genevieve had written something on the back in faded blue pen. He doesn't see it yet, but he could be useful. I put the photo down, and I felt nothing. No rage. No heartbreak. Just stillness. Like I'd finally reached the edge of a storm and stepped outside to find the air had gone quiet. That was the day I stopped wondering why. I went to the attorney's office the next morning, armed with everything. The forged prenup, the red box evidence, Lorraine's statement, and Bennett's documentation. My lawyer took one look and said, "She won't push this now. If she does, we file criminal charges." By the end of the week, her legal team quietly withdrew the prenup claim. No court. No battle. No victory speeches. Just a quiet, official email. Both parties agree to a clean and uncontested dissolution. And just like that, it was over. No public scandal. No courtroom drama. No clawing for money or sympathy. I left the marriage with my name, my peace, and my spine intact. Genevieve moved out of state shortly after. I never heard from her again. I heard rumors that she lost job prospects, that she tried to reinvent herself somewhere warmer. But I never cared enough to confirm. What mattered more was what I found after. Not revenge, not vindication, but real connection. Willa, the motel clerk who once handed me greasy tacos without judgment, is now my partner. We're slow about it. No rushing. Just long walks, shared playlists, and Sundays where no one expects perfection. She knows the whole story. She didn't flinch. Sometimes, I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking I'm back in that house, waiting for a door to open that won't. But then I hear her breathing next to me. And I remember, the storm is over. Not because I won, but because I walked away before it swallowed me.